we've had this conversation in the past, that one of the unique things about Chassidus is that it explains Torah Shebeksav, it explains Psukim. The way Torah works, of course, everything is based on Torah Shebeksav. But so much of Torah learning is learning Torah Shebal Peh, learning Mishnah and Gemara and so on. And it's learned in such a way where the Psukim, the Chumash, which is the source of the ideas of Torah Shebal Peh, are not a primary part of the study. In other words, a yeshiva bacher is concerned with understanding Pshat and the Gemara. He's not so concerned with understanding Pshat and the Pasuk. Chassidus, the whole idea of Chassidus, it's part of Pnimiyas HaTorah, which is of course connected to Mikra. To a very, very great extent goes on Psukim. It explains actual Psukim from the Chumash. And it studies the words of a Pasuk the way you would study a Gemara, analyzing every word and every letter and so forth. And of course, often Chassidus will give you a Pshat, will give you an interpretation, which is different than the simple Pshat and the simple interpretation, or even Remez and Derush and so on. And what emerges is a preciseness, is a exactness in how you're understanding the words, which is incredible, which is very, very marvelous. In other words, when you learn the Chumash, and you understand, of course, that the Chumash is the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the words of the Eibishter of the Chumash, which means this finite number of letters is infinite. It carries the infinite wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means hafach ba v'hafach ba dekula ba. You can continue to study it, and you continue to study it, and each time you study it, you find more, and you find new. And I recently mentioned in a class that in Nigla de Teda, it's medivag, it's medidavag, but it's limited. The infinity of Teda is primarily in the Pnimius. And one of the basic aspects of this process is to read a pasuk and understand the choice of words of the Torah exactly and precisely, and as al shtimmen, it should be exactly as it's supposed to be. So we're learning a Maamar, and this is our 6th class, I believe, where we're studying a Maamar, and we're talking about all kinds of things. But in the end, in the final analysis, ultimately what we're doing is we're explaining Psukim. And what the Maamar does is it provides an interpretation of the words of these Psukim, which is so rich and so exact that it enhances how the Pasuk would be understood without it in an incomparable way. It adds so much more to the Pasuk than the Pasuk would be without this addition. So first, let's repeat the Psukim again. We all know the story that according to Rashi, the day before Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu converted all the Jewish people by bringing karbones, by sprinkling blood, by having them go to the mikveh, having them say Nasa v'Nishma. And of course, before they left Mitzrayim, they also did Bris Milah. They brought a carbon and did Bris Milah. And then, of course, the next day was Matan Torah. The Eibishter gave us the Torah. And when the Eibishter gave us the Torah describes the following: Vayireu Elokei Yisroel. They saw the God of Israel, of Yisroel. V'tachas raglav, and underneath his feet, Kemaisa livnas asaper. There was an action. There was a form, which was livnas asaper, like white sapphire, or as our mind would interpret it, bricks of sapphire. Uche'etzem hashamayim lateir, as the sky, which is of course transparent, which is no mitzias, which is colorless, is transparent. This is how they saw Elokus. And then the next pasuk says, "Ve'elatzile b'nei Yisrael le'ishalach yodei," that Hashem did not extend His arm to the Atzile b'nei Yisrael, to the sons of Israel's Atzilim. That means like sort of ministers, officers, prominent people. Vayechazu asolikim, they saw God. Vayechlu vayushtu, they ate and they drank. Now the classic understanding of these psukim is that Yidden were getting very comfortable with the idea of Elokus. Hashem was revealing Himself. The event of Har Sinai is equivalent to prophecy and much, much higher than prophecy. And from the perspective of the Jewish people, there should have been an enormous amount of trepidation. There should have been an enormous amount of seriousness and fear and awe and a sense of the earnestness of the event that they're seeing Elokus. So the Torah describes that they were cavalier about it, they were casual about it. So you read the Psukim as follows. Vayireu Elokei Yisroel, they saw the God of Israel, v'sachas raglav, underneath his feet. This kemaisa livnus asapir is like the action of livnus asapir, uche'etzam hashamayim loteir, as well as like the sky is transparent because it's pure. And then it says, Vaytzili b'nei Yisrael le'shalach yodei, Hashem did not punish the Atzili b'nei Yisrael. In other words, they deserve to be wiped out. They deserve to be punished. When you, in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch, when you act casual and comfortable and not with the adequate reverence, you should be punished. So the Torah says, Atzili b'nei Yisrael le'shalach yodei, Hashem did not punish Atzili b'nei Yisrael. And of course, Rashi says he didn't want to punish them then, because they didn't want to be compromising the simcha of Matan Torah. But later on he did punish them, and the pasuk concludes, Vayechazu es Elokim, they saw Elokim, Vayechlu vayishtu, they ate and they drank. So it's understood to mean that they were so comfortable with godliness that they related to godliness like as if it's something you can eat and drink, or slightly differently, they looked at godliness and continued eating and drinking. So this is the simple pshat of these psukim. The words make a considerable amount of sense. The underlying point is that Yidden became insensitive to the godliness that they were encountering, and they behaved inappropriately, and the Torah tells us that even though they behaved inappropriately, Hashem decided not to punish them right away, but to punish them later. According to this interpretation, many of the words of these psukim are imprecise, right? V'tachas raglav, what does it mean underneath his feet? Why does it say Elokei Yisroel rather than Hashem? And so on. And also, why does every single word in the pasuk needs to be explained? In this Maamar, the pasuk is elucidated, is explained in such a way that every single word is clear. In the Maamar itself, he doesn't really explain the words Vayechlu vayishtu, the last two words, they ate and they drank. But pretty much besides for that, the Maamar explains every single word of the pasuk, and you see how exact the pasuk is. In other words, in Pshutei Shel Mikra, this psukim describe the Yidden seeing Elokus. In Pnimiyas HaTorah, in Kabbalah and Chassidus, these psukim are describing Yidden seeing Elokus. But the specifics of how Pnimiyas extracts these specifics enhances the preciseness of how you read these psukim in an incomparable way. So let's begin. Okay, line 307. V'zehu, and now that we had these 5 classes, where we discussed the concept of Adam Ha'elyon, we discussed the concept of Kisei HaKaved, we discussed the concept that what comes after the Kisei through the Raglayim is a Tzimtzum. The Gabi is an Atzilus, until ultimately there could be a Klippa. And we also discussed the idea of Avonim and Levanim, that there is God-made letters and bricks, and there are man-made or human-made letters and bricks. So having explored all of those ideas at great length, we go back to the original pasuk. Vayireu Elokei Yisroel, they saw the God of Israel. And the diuk that the Rebbe has on these words is why it says Elokei. We know that Elokim is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu associated with tzimtzum, with diminution, with contraction. If you're describing the great revelation of the Eibishter, especially since it's a revelation which has no equal, not before and not after, like it says in Chassidus, Matan Torah lo yihye eid apam, there never will be another event of Matan Torah. Why is the Eibishter described as Elokei Yisroel? So the Rebbe explains that true, the Eibishter was revealing himself on a very high level, but the Yidden who were seeing Elokei Yisroel were on such a low level, they only saw the Elokus through this lavush. It says in the pasuk before, the psukim before, Meisha nigesh lavadi alavaya. Meisha Rabbeinu approaches the Anan, the cloud. Meisha Rabbeinu approaches Havaya, but the pasuk says Veheim lo yigash, or Yidden are not allowed to approach. Says the Alter Rebbe, why? Ki sheirish bechinas Meisha, the root of Meisha Rabbeinu, hoya lamaylam bechinas kisei Havaya is higher than the level of kisei hamislabish b'yabish comes into the lower worlds, and therefore he was able to relate to Atzilus directly, and therefore Nigash levadi el havayim, but the rest of the Yidden were not able to relate to Havaya directly. They can only relate to Shem Elokim. And therefore it doesn't say Vayireu es Hashem, but rather it says Vayireu es Elokei Yisroel. Elokus on the level of Elokim. In one sentence, Moshe Rabbeinu related to Elokus from the Madreg of Adam Ha'Rishon, Adam Ha'Elyon, pardon me, but without the second tzimtzum called Kisei, and the rest of the Yidden related to Elokus only through Adam Ha'Elyon, as he's mislabish and becomes covered over in the Kisei. So when it comes into Biyat, a new Metzias. So the Torah says, Moshe Rabbeinu approaches Shem Havaya, and the rest of the Yidden relating only to Shem Elokim. Vayireu es Elokei Yisroel. Which is why Nitna Torah, the Torah had to be given through Moshe Rabbeinu, because Torah is Min HaShamayim. Torah comes from Atzilus, Hanam Shonim Shcham Atzilus, the Bria Torah comes from the Bria Derech Chinas Kisei now. But when it comes into Bria, it passes through the Kisei, which reforms the Torah. If the Torah becomes an inyan of Seichel. And the ideas of Torah which are higher are, so to speak, hidden. But Torah comes into the lower worlds as well, in order to bring Torah from the Atzilus level, where it's pure godliness, to the Bria level. All of a sudden requires Moshe Rabbeinu himself, because he himself had intellectual access, spiritual reach. Which also, as the Torah says about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu comes from Mayim, which is Bechinas, Mayim al Yenim, and the Rabbi here interprets that it goes on Atzilus Chulu. And in some Maamar it actually says, Kimena Mayim Mishisiyu goes on Kesed, higher than Atzilus. So Moshe Rabbeinu could relate to Atzilus and to Shem Havaya. Masha Ein Kein Hazakenim, as opposed to the elders. They couldn't access and apprehend godliness on Atzilus level, Rak B'Bria, only through the garment of Bria. Which is why when they describe seeing Elokus, it says Vayireu es Elokei Yisroel. They're seeing godliness, but Bechinas Elokei, the godly aspect, who midas hatzimtzum, v'hahester Bechinas Kisei. Now they witnessed the concept of concealment as represented by the Kisei. Masha'en came by Moshe, the post of Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, V'nigash el Havai, he approaches Shem Havai, shu b'chinas l'mayla mi'at tzimtzum, he's above the tzimtzum, the Shem Elokim, t'hainu l'mayla, b'chinas ha'kisei, which is higher than the level of the Kisei Yaakov. And that's the pshat, Vayireu es Elokei Yisroel. So the first observation that the pasuk deserves to have is why it says Elokei Yisroel, the God of Israel. And this is the answer, because we're talking about Elokim and not Havai. They're seeing godliness, but through a lesser name, through a greater levush, with the levush of Shem Elokim. Because this is the only level of Asaga they were possibly able to have. I believe we talked about this even earlier in learning this Maamar. But we've had many discussions in earlier classes along these lines. And the essence of it is the idea of being inspired or being enlightened. In other words, people have all kinds of things that they create or that they're inspired by. They come up with ideas, they come up with feelings, they come up with all kinds of different expressions, if you will. And of course, the expressions that a person has, his intellectual expression, whatever the case is a reflection of him or her. And there's two types of people. Some people have the ability to create ideas and to radiate them outward from themselves and teach them and so on and so forth. And that's all they're giving is an idea. Real people, deeper people, are inspired people. The meaning of the word inspiration is that their idea is not coming from no place. Their idea is coming from their neshama, from their spirit, from their personality, from their essence. And in the ideas that they teach, you can sense the inspiration, which is the source of it. In other words, That's what Chassidus is all about. Chassidus is all about everything coming from the neshama. Another way of saying everything coming from the neshama is to say that everything begins with Ein Sof. But nothing is the neshama. Nothing is the Ein Sof. The ideas and the reality are all symptoms of the Ein Sof, but of course they're limited and they're complex and they're detailed and so forth and so on. But in an inspired person, every single word he speaks reflects the inspiration which is his source. And on the highest level, that's what a neshama of Atzilus means. A neshama of Atzilus means a neshama that's sensitive to Ein Sof. A neshama of Atzilus means a neshama that's in touch with the source of the inspiration, which is the basis for all the ideas that the person is going to teach. And this is the madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the madrega of Shem Havaya. This is not a question of how well he understands the Torah. This is a question of whether his Torah is an inspired Torah or an uninspired Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu's madrege is nigash Moshe levade el havaya. The level of Moshe Rabbeinu is such that he himself is inspired, and the Torah as he understands it, and of course understanding Torah is an intellectual thing, but the Torah as he understands it is an understanding which is enriched by light, by Ein Sof, by inspiration. And the rest of the Jewish people don't have that inspiration. In other words, they're able to understand this Torah, but they don't have the same kind of inspiration. They're not experiencing the Elokus, the Ein Sof, which is behind the Chochmas HaTorah. They're getting only the ideas of the Torah, the words of the Torah, but the enlightenment, the Ein Sof, which is the source of the Torah, is not reaching them. Or to say it in slightly different words, and this is probably more accurate, all the Yidden experience some kind of inspiration. But the inspiration that the Atzilei B'nai Yisrael experienced, that the other Jewish people experienced, is that the words of the Torah and the ideas of the Torah were understood by them only in an intellectual way, and they had some sense of the Ein Sof, which is the source of their intellect. While in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu actually experienced the Ein Sof, experienced the inspiration, and how from this inspiration those ideas radiated, if you will. And therefore, by Moshe Rabbeinu it is written, V'nigash Moshe el Havaya, and by the rest of them it says, Vayireu Elokei Yisroel. So we're explaining this pasuk, and we see that the choice of word to denote the Eibishter, Vayireu Elokei Yisroel, is precise, because the Zekanim, as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, were not relating to Havaya, as it were. They're relating only to Shem Elikim. So let's read from line 319. V'lachei ne'emar bahem. When it comes to the Zekanim, the elders of the Jewish people, and the rest of the Jewish people, later on the Rebbe is going to mention also included in this group is Nadav and Avihu. It's not in the Maamar, but there's a beer that follows this, which we're not going to learn, where he mentions Nadav and Avihu. Bechinas Elokei, the godliness to which they related the Shem Elikim, which is hu midas hadin v'atzimtzum. They related to godliness on a measure of contraction and concealment, because they could not see the godliness directly. They couldn't relate to the Shem Havaya. And again, basically you would say that they experienced the ideas of the Torah without the inspiration. More subtly you would say they experienced the inspiration, but the inspiration, how it's much more unavailable, much more hidden, because they're primarily understanding the chokhmas of the Torah, which is bechinas kisei hanal, the concept of the chair, the seat, the throne, the merkava, about which we spoke in an earlier class. Namely, in other words, that the godliness of Atzilus was covered over, case aleph, the godliness of Atzilus is covered over by a garment. The only aspect of Atzilus which reached the lower words is raglaim, is regel. Mashen came by Moshe, supposed to be Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah tells us, V'nigash el Havaya. Moshe Rabbeinu approaches Havaya, Shuhu bechinas shalamayla meyad tzimtzum d'Shem Elikim. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was above the level where there is the contraction, the limitation of Shem Elikim. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was getting the Torah and understanding the Torah, with a much more direct sense of the source of the Torah, the Chochmas HaTorah, the wisdom of the Torah, the ideas of the Torah, come from the infinity of the Eibishter, come from inspiration, which is higher than Chochmah. Moshe Rabbeinu related much more directly to the inspiration, which is the source of this Chochmah. He didn't have this garment, this concealment, called Case Aleph, which covers over Adam Ha'elyon, and he related to the Torah in a much more direct and a much more godly way. So the Pasuk says, whereas the intellectual access, the inspirational aspect of the access of the elders and of Yidden Bechlal, they were receiving the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when they received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they heard Hashem's words. When they received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they understood Hashem's ideas. When they received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they felt the inspiration of godliness, which is the source of those ideas. But because they were relating to the godliness through the concealment of Shem Elokim, Shehu Acher HaHelam the Kisei Hanal, which means they related to the godliness as it comes through the second screen, not just Adam Ha'elyon, which is Atzilus, but Kisei, which is Malchus, that affects that from the godliness of Atzilus, the only thing that comes into the lower world is Regel. So the Rebbe says, Lochein Sham, when you're on that level, Ro v'yisigu bechinas livnas hasapir ubechinas ke'etzem hashamayim. Lotayel, of course, that's how the pasuk finishes. What they were able to apprehend, what they were able to perceive, what they're able to relate to were these two ideas of livnas hasapir and etzem hashamayim lotayel. Now in the shir that we discussed last time, livnas hasapir represents oisius, letters, words in other languages, and etzem hashamayim lotayel represents oisius, words, letters in Lashon HaKodesh. In other words, they related to the Torah only through the words, only through the letters. The ability to relate directly to the Oirat Torah, to the light of the Torah, precluded them. It was unavailable to them. Whatever aspect of Torah they were able to perceive began with understanding the Oisiyas HaTorah. Because that's what a tzimtzum, that's what a concealment does. You're not able anymore to relate directly to the Oir, to the Ruchnias, to the inspiration, and you relate instead to the Oisiyas HaTorah, to the letters and the words of the Torah themselves, and more specifically how the Oisiyas HaTorah have these two levels. The lower level is Livnas HaSapir, and the highest level, the higher level is Ke'etzem Hashamayim Lotayr. Says the Rebbe Shem Beis Bechinas Eisiyas Hanal, which are the two types of letters that we described earlier in the last week's shir. And the point is whether they saw Livnas HaSapir, which is the equivalent of Eisiyas in a foreign language, bricks, whether they saw Etzem Hashamayim Lotayr, which is the equivalent of letters in Lashon HaKodesh, which is Avonim Midei Shamayim. They related to the Torah only through Eisiyas HaTorah. Dahainu, this means they were still on a high enough level to relate to the Eisiyas HaTorah as they are in Lashon HaKodesh, as represented by the words Etzem Hashamayim Loteir. And the Rebbe says, V'hu Eisiyas HaTorah shenitna me'Hashamayim, which is the letters of the Torah that came straight from heaven. And if you listened to and you watched the previous class, I explained that to you, like the idea of tzura atzmis, words that carry ideas in a very natural and organic way, because the words that carry that idea come directly from the subconscious, from the etzem. That's what Eisiyas of Torah Shebeksav means. Even if they were able to relate to the letters in Lashon HaKodesh, they were seeing the letters, they were not seeing the light. Because they were seeing the letters as they exist after the second screen, after the second concealment, after the second symptom of Kisei. They related to holiness only through the stones. In other words, the light, the holiness itself they couldn't relate to. They related to the holiness only through the Avonim. Moreover, another aspect of this limitation in their access to the event of Matan Torah is that yes, Sham Gam Kim Bechinas Livnas Hasapid. There's a lower level of Aces which is called Livnas Hasapid, and again the way we translate the words Livnas Hasapid means bricks of sapphire, Shem Aces, which represent letters. Hamizbared Emiyayin Losh, that don't come from heaven, they don't come from Atzilos. They're not Aces Atzmim of Torah, but rather they come from the world. And how the Torah is interpreted in the world in a variety of different languages, by a variety of different people in different times and places and so forth and so on. So this enriches the Torah. It adds to the Torah so many more letters, so many more words, but they're in other languages, which is the idea of tzura mitzura. It's not a tzura atzmis. Shebechinas ACS elu, that this type of letter certainly einam dafka rak tachas bechinas kisei. These letters don't exist at all. Only under the kisei do they exist. See, these three words, einam dafka rak, they make no sense in Hebrew. But if you understand Yiddish, you understand that this is Hebrew translating Yiddish. I've told this to you on a number of occasions in the past, that the reason the grammar in Maamar Chassidishe is so poor because it's not Hebrew grammar, it's Yiddish grammar. It says, Shebechinas ACS elu einam. These letters don't exist. Dafke rak tachas bechinas kisei, the only place where they do exist is only underneath the tzimtzum of kisei kanal bariches do these ACS emerge. Which means, in other words, this is a very interesting thought. The idea that Torah is spoken in other languages is based on the fact that there's a limitation in how one understands the Torah. If someone is able to relate to the Torah in Atzilas, in other words, relate to the Torah in an inspired way, there would be no need to translate it into other languages, or to say it in different words. Other languages would never be able to carry what it is that they're sensitive to. But when one is only relating to the Torah on a level of oisius, in other words, they're not getting nearly as much of the inspiration, of the Or, of the Ein Seif, of the Torah, and instead they're relating to the oisius and to the avonim. Therefore, when a person on this lower level, the idea of translating the Torah into other languages becomes necessary and becomes useful and beneficial. So the Pasuk says, let's read the Pasuk again. Vayireu es Elokei Yisroel. We're talking about the Jewish people who are on a lower level. And they see the God of Israel on the level of Elokim. And then it says, V'tachas raglov. And underneath his feet is Kemaisa livnas hasapid. Underneath his feet, which come after the kisei, you see oisiyos bidei adam uche'etzam hashamayim l'teir. Perhaps you can see also oisius that are bidei shamayim, but that's all they're able to see is oisius. They're not seeing the Or. So that's the explanation of the first pasuk, and every single word in the pasuk is precise. Then it says in the next pasuk, now we go to line 331, V'zehu, once we understand exactly the reading of the first pasuk, and of course the idea which has dominated this maamar most is the word Tachas Raglov, that they're relating to Lakus only through the Madrega of Raglayim, which is why they're perceiving only Livnas Hasapir and Etzem Hashamayim Loteir. So the pasuk says, in the next pasuk as follows, V'latzil b'nei Yisrael le'ishalach yad. To the Atzilim of the Bnei Yisrael, he did not extend his hand. Now understand that in Pshuta Shalmik, in Rashi, V'latzil b'nei Yisrael le'ishalach yad is interpreted to mean that he didn't punish them for being too comfortable around godliness and acting in a way that was cavalier and disrespectful and so on. Alter Rebbe interprets it entirely differently. V'latzil b'nei Yisrael le'ishalach yad means to these great Jews, but as great as they were underneath the Parsha, they were underneath Kisei. Hashem did not give his hand, meaning to say, he did not allow them to see the godliness which is in Atzilus, which is above the Kisei. Pirush, Yadehem bechinas chagas. The hand of HaKadosh Baruch goes on the midas of Atzilus. Shem smuchem al hareish, they're close to the head, u'mechubarim, being attached to him. And therefore, v'hem lamaylam bechinas Kisei, the held, they're above the Kisei, the case, aleph, the concealment, and the seat, which we described at length earlier. Because the Maamar, the Alter Rebbe, told us that when it comes to a kisei, which covers over, the feet are the only thing which hangs down beneath the kisei, and the arms remain above. So Lei Shalach Yadeh has nothing to do with punishing them. Instead, Lei Shalach Yadeh means he doesn't allow them to perceive the godliness of Atzilus because they're Tachas HaKisei. They can only relate to godliness through Asias, the Elokus, which is so full of light and so inspired that the Asias are tafel, a bottle, and not sensed, they have no relationship with. Line 334, Al-Kain, therefore, has a Kainim, even the elders, but they were lower than the Madrege of Meisha and Aaron. They did not merit to experience this kind of a revelation which is above the kisei. The concept of the arms and the godliness associated with arms, meaning to say, Torah, where the inspiration, the Oira Torah, the Ein Sof, which is the Pnimiyas Torah, is very strongly dominant and felt in the Eisiyas Torah and the Seichel Torah, and V'hasakosam Hoyerak Ayedei HaKisei. There's a Canaan related to godliness only through the intervention, through the tzimtzum, through the concealment of the kisei. V'zehu, which is the pshat and the pasuk, v'tachas ragla v'gemer. They related to lakus only from the level of what's underneath the feet. But therefore, v'lachein l'shalach yadei eleim, they couldn't relate to lakus on the level of yadayim. Says the Rebbe Vagam Shenikrayim Atzilim b'nei Yisroel. We're calling them Atzilim. Now, Atzilim means people of great stature, people of great worth. But of course, the literal translation of the word Atzilim is from the word Atzilus. And Atzilus, by definition, means inspiration. What does Atzilus mean? Atzilus means an experience of Ein Sof, an experience of emanation, of godliness. Or to say it in different words, Atzilus means an experience of prophecy. And we all understand what prophecy is. Prophecy is not somebody understanding something better, but prophecy is relating to something on the level of Ein Sof, which is the source of the Chokhmah. And in fact, by these very Zekanim, by these very Atzilim, it says later on in the Chumash, in Parshas Ba'aleis Chava Yetzal Min HaRuach, that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Eibush that emanated from the spirit of Moshe Rabbeinu on the Ayin Zekanim, on these Atzilim. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu's Ein Sof reached these neshamis also. Says the Rebbe Im calls that nevertheless, yes, Hefesh b'neim. There's a difference. L'Meisha and Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu experienced Ein Sof and Atzilus. They also experienced something of what the Ein Sof of Atzilus is, but they experienced it on a much, much lower madreg. Sheheim loihi sigu. They were only able to reach and to assess and to sense Rak ha'ores ha'atzilus, a ray of atzilus, ha'mesabesh b'briya, as it comes into briya. Kumei shekosov v'yiru Elokei, Yisroel v'gemer. They saw godliness of Shem Elokim. So although they had a relationship to atzilus, in other words, they also, when they received the Torah Har Sinai, did not only have the words and the ideas, but the inspiration. But the inspiration that they had was through Shem Elokim. Therefore, they were not able to approach to the level of Shem Havai. And that's the pshat in the second pasuk. And then the pasuk finishes, they saw godliness. And over here in our Maamar, the Rebbe doesn't explain the words Vayechazu es Elokim, but in the biur, I have it, it's included in the PDF, but I'm not going to teach it. Vayechazu es Elokim, it begins, let's say line 436. Vayechazu Elokim means they saw godliness. But in Torah, the word chizayin is in Aramaic, right? You're familiar with this probably. That the earlier Nevi'im are called royim. Shmuel HaNavi refers to himself as a roya. Roya means a seer. The later Nevi'im calls themselves choizim, like Chazain Yeshayahu, Chazain Evadyahu, and so on. Chazain means a vision. And there's many discussions in Chassidus explaining the difference between the word roya and the word choizim. And basically the difference is that roya means seeing in Hebrew, and choizim means seeing in another language, which is similar to the idea of Etzam Hashmaim Loteir and Livna Sasaper that we're talking about over here. A choizer sees indirectly. He's on a lower madrega. So these Atzilus b'nei Yisrael, although they had some relationship with Atzilus, but the Atzilus to which they related was through a chizayin, because they were getting Atzilus through a lekim. They were getting Atzilus after the kisei. They were getting Atzilus only through the raglayim and not through the yadayim. But Moshe Rabbeinu, it's written, "V'nigash lebechinas Shem Havaya." He related to Shem Havaya itself, and of course this applies also to Aaron HaKohen, v'chein Aveis Ha'olam, and the Aveis Hayu b'merkava lebechinas Reis Elmu, also on the level of Atzilus, Kaniska, as we discussed earlier. So we explain all of the words in the pasuk. V'latzila b'nei Yisrael le'shalach Yisrael v'yechazu Yisrael lekim. The last two words, v'yechlu v'yishtu, is not explained here in the Maamar, but it's explained later in the Bir. And it has to do with birurim. V'yechlu v'yishtu has to do with the process of eating and drinking. When you eat and drink, it's not nivla be'evarim. You don't put food into your system and it goes straight into your limbs. It has to be processed, it has to be digested, which is a symptom. I need to reform it, to change it, which is a lower madrege. That in Atzilus wasn't necessary. It's not the madrege of Moshe Rabbeinu. So I want to finish the class by touching a little bit on this reference to Atzilim and Atzilus and Nevuah. That's how I want to finish our discussion on this Maamar. One of the serious aspects of the Jewish theology of Nevuah, the understanding of prophecy in Rambam, and of course this is discussed later on in the Rebbe Siches, is that there is an incredibly strong relationship between Chokhmah and Nevuah, wisdom and prophecy. In contrast to other theologies that argue the exact opposite, that in order to give credibility to prophecy, the prophet is a fool. When God speaks to a man, and the man is a fool, or in the words of the Rambam, which the Rambam loves to say about Muhammad HaMeshugah, and then he speaks ideas of great wisdom and great enlightenment and great depth and great intelligence, you know certainly that it's the word of God. He could never have said them on his own. He's too stupid. He's not smart enough. In other words, there is a notion that the best kind of prophet is the least intelligent person. So you know for sure that it's the word of God. That's not his own words. In Lahavdil, I mentioned this too in a previous class also, the place you see something similar to this. In Yiddishkeit is the Drashas Haran that explains that Moshe Rabbeinu was an Aral Sfosayim and a Kvat Pen, a Kvat Loshen. So that when he would give the Torah, the Yidden would know that it's not his words, but it's the Eibishter's words. But that's a very, very different concept, because Moshe Rabbeinu is higher than words altogether. Misam Pela Adam, but it's a different idea. But in Yiddishkeit, Nevuah has everything to do with Chokhmah. In other words, the Torah concept of prophecy is not a miracle. The Torah concept of prophecy is not a random event. Hashem has a message to send, he looks for a messenger, he picks a fellow and he comes and he talks to him. The Torah concept of prophecy is rather the graduation of humanity, the culmination, the highest level of being a human being, in the wording of the Rambam and the Shmeina Prakim, the Akdamah to Pirkei Avos, is to be a chassid. And what's a chassid? A navi. You have a body. In addition to having a body, you have character traits and faculties, intellect, emotion, senses. And a human being who works over his body and develops his faculties and refines them, and he engages his mind in abstract ideas, he seeks esoteric truth, he tries to relate to ideas which are beyond the material. In the wording of the Rambam, L'pa'amim Yisroel, L'pa'amim Lo Yisroel, there are occasions when Nevuah, when prophecy will inspire such a person. So nobody is deserving of prophecy. Nobody could say that he's reached a level where he's made himself into a prophet. In the final analysis, in the end, Hashem is menabe as b'nei ha'adam. The Eibishter chooses to make somebody a prophet. But he doesn't choose to make somebody a prophet ad hoc, at random, without any cheshbon. The person comes closer and closer to Elokus, and when the Eibishter chooses to, they're inspired. And of course, the ultimate aspect of this approaching Elokus is using their minds. Not using their mind to understand how to make a machine, but using their mind to understand esoteric ideas. What is a malach, and what is ruchnius, and what is elokus, what the Rambam calls Maise Merkava and Maise Bereishis, to be mitayel bepardes. That's what a Navi does. He's a mizbeided, he lives a solitude in his life, he's by himself, and he uses his mind to try and understand ideas which are very sensitive and subtle, and he can only understand them b'derech ideas hashlila and so forth and so on, and he engages in this intellectual journey, this intellectual pursuit, and if the Eibishter wishes, he has an inspiration. So when somebody has an inspiration of Nevuah, it's the classic idea. Could you say that he's earned it, or could you say that he hasn't earned it? And the answer is, he's earned it indirectly, like the concept of Avedas Matana you have in Chassidus, like a bonus. He's brought himself to a certain point, to a certain precipice, which he cannot pass. The Eibishter inspires him and takes him across that threshold that he shouldn't just have a great mind that's involved not just in understanding physical things, understanding the halachas of Torah on a level of nigla, but he's metayel bepardes, he's pursuing esoterica, if you will. And he's relating to ideas in a very abstract way, and then the Eibishter gives him the inspiration. That's what Nevuah is. And that's the pshat, vayatzal min haruach. Every Navi experiences Atzilus. Because Nevuah, by definition, is the experience of Ein Sof. Just like in a human being, it is basic to our belief that the depth of a human being isn't the mind. The depth of the human being is the soul. And the soul is infinite, and the mind is finite and complex. And all ideas that the mind is inspired by radiate from the infinity of the neshama. But for most people, ideas that come from the infinity of the neshama to the conscious mind are going from the subconscious to the consciousness. In other words, you can't experience the inspired neshama. You can only experience the ideas that come from the neshama. But the neshama itself remains hidden. The meaning of being a Navi, the meaning of being a Bal Ruach HaKodesh, is that on some level of consciousness, some obvious, some aware level, you're experiencing the light, the Ein Sof, the soul, the subconscious, which is the source of those ideas. That's the Madrega of Atzilus. So the Alter Rebbe tells us in this Maamar that in this itself there's Madregas. The Atzilei b'nei Yisroel, even though the Torah will tell us later, Vayatzal min haruach, that they experienced Atzilus, says the Rebbe, the Atzilus that they experienced is after the Parshah, is after the Kisei, after the Parshah. The Atzilus that they experienced was through the Oisius of Livnas HaSapir and through the Oisius of Etzam HaShamayim Loter. They may have had some kind of an inspiration, but it came to them after the words of the Torah. And after the ideas of the Torah, they had a sense of the Ruach HaKodesh. As opposed to a neshama of Atzilus, and especially Moshe Rabbeinu, where he first experiences the Ein Sof, first experiences the Atzilus, first experiences the godliness, and from that emerges, radiates the ideas of the Torah and the mitzvahs of the Torah and so forth. And this is why by Moshe Rabbeinu there's the Madrega of Yadayim, and by these Atzilim there's only the Madrega of Raglayim. So we've finished the Maamar, and the beer we're not going to learn, we're certainly not going to learn it now, maybe in a few years from today we'll. If the Eibishter will bless us, we'll run out of stuff to learn in the Likutei Torah and Torah, and maybe we'll go back and do this.